So I want to thank everybody so much for being here today. This is our second to last webinar of the year, and I'm very, very, very excited to have you all join in on a wonderful conversation where we will be talking about disabilities and issues and challenges that youth in foster care have faced. I'm very, very proud to bring to you a wonderful panel, and we're going to have a powerful discussion. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know what state you're representing, what city you're from, what organization you're representing as well. We definitely love the introductions and meeting new people and having everybody here today. Just a little bit about the Youth Voice program. So my name is Raquel Wilson for all of you who may be here for the first time. If it is your first time, welcome. If not, hi, welcome again. We're happy to have you. I'm the proud Youth Voice program manager here at Foster Media Connections. This program has been around since 2016. It was created to provide workshops to teach foster youth journalism and teach them how to basically turn their lived experience and their stories into publishable pieces. And so I'm very, very excited because we have since then turned this program upside down and reshaped it, and we continue to reshape it through educational workshops. We have different writing and poetry contests. We do different writing submissions on different topics that impact foster youth and juvenile justice impacted youth. And so I'm just very, very happy to have you here today, to have your continuous support as we continue to dive in to different sectors of conversations, about different issues that us as foster youth have dealt with and faced, to have real powerful discussions so that we can ultimately educate people that work and serve in places that foster youth are in, and also provide some encouragement and empowerment to foster youth who are currently in the system. And so thank you again for you guys for all being here today. And so at this time, you should see a quick survey poll pop up on your screen. And this just lets us know if you're a current foster youth, if you're working as a social worker, if you're a resource parent or adoptive parent. And then it lets us also know, how did you hear about this information, so that we can continue to try to get our events and communicate and engage foster youth, and let them know all of the great things that we're doing over here, to not only amplify the voices of foster youth, but to help them amplify their voices as well. And so I'm going to just allow some time for everybody to fill out the survey, please. And as I said, this just helps us with letting us know how we can better assist and engage foster youth and those who better serve foster youth as well. All right, so you should see the survey results pop up soon. And it looks like we have some foster youth here. We have some resource parents. I always love when we have social workers and attorneys. Next year, we're going to be doing a special event for in collaboration with social workers. And so I'm really, really, really happy to always see social workers and attorneys here that you work with foster youth. I really, really love that, because this is important. Those who work with foster youth, this is a great program. It's important that you participate in these type of conversations, invite your program participants to these type of conversations, and also share with them, some of the resources that we provide that can ultimately help them amplify their voices and give them some of that empowerment and extra motivation that they need to continue to be successful and walk a successful pathway. I'm seeing that our email blasts are always working, which I love. Word of mouth, which I love. That makes me feel really, really good. If you attended one of our previous events, thank you so much. And so just thank you all for just being here today and having the will to fill out our survey. I'm really, really, really happy about that. And so without further ado, I would love to introduce to you our wonderful panelists. And I am going to start from the left. And so if all my panelists could please come on camera and wave once I introduce you. I appreciate that, and then we're going to go right into the discussion. And so, first up, I have Naya Dyer, who is an experienced foster care system with autism. She used her personal experiences to bring awareness to the public about the need for system changes. Dyer is going to college for social welfare degree, and she hopes to be a voice for other youth after graduating. Dyer has a passion for advocacy and spends her free time advocating for foster youth and people in the disability community. So Naya, thank you so much for being here today. We really, really appreciate you for always showing up and being a consistent program participant. And then so next up, we have Nyasia. And so Nyasia Kinsey is a former foster youth and current member of the Summer Youth Council. She spent 7 to 8 years in the foster care system and is now a proud college student. She loves educating youth, especially those with similar experiences to her own. And Kinsey believes that each and every day that we wake up is a chance for us to be something greater than ourselves. And so thank you so much, Nyasia, for being here today. We really, really appreciate you and all of your consistent support that you provide the program and showing up to these type of open discussion forums. And then so next up we have Rylan James Bill is a May 2022 UC Berkeley graduate holding a bachelor's degree in pure mathematics. He's a proud and grateful to have helped with planning for Foster Youth Awareness Month with Berkeley Hope Scholars in the spring of 2021. When he could, Bill participated in his home county's California Youth Connection meetings and assisted with planning of a conference for transitional age youth. Additionally, he went to Sacramento twice to advocate for laws to help break down barriers for former foster youth. His Holmes County Independent Living Program honored him by allowing to give a graduation speech, after receiving an associate's degree in accounting. He currently resides in Chicago, working as a staff accountant with plans to become licensed as a CPA. And Rylan, thank you so much for being here today. We're definitely happy to have you. This is your first time participating in one of our open forum discussions, and so we cannot wait to see all of the great things that you're going to contribute today for our discussion. And so next up, we have Nisa Zamara, who is a former foster youth. As a teenager, she suffered from an illness that required her to stay in the hospital for months at a time. She bounced around between residential facilities and hospital for much of her youth. Zamara was never in a stable place for more than a few months and didn't receive much formal education throughout her adolescence. Despite this, she graduated high school at age 17 and decided to pursue higher education at her local community college, where she graduated with an associate's degree in communication and social and behavior science. Currently, Zamara is pursuing a bachelor's degree at the University of California, Berkeley, in media studies. She hopes to use this degree to be a voice of empowerment for marginalized communities. While she would never wish anyone to grow up in the foster care system, she states that she would not change her experience since it taught her resilience. She hopes to inspire others to be courageous, creative, and in the face of adversity. So thank you so much, Nisa, for being here today and joining us. This is also your first discussion, but you're no stranger to the program. You have written for us a few times, and so I really, really appreciate you being here today to participate and for you to share all of your experiences and the things that you endured, while in foster care. And so next up, we have Kiana, and Kiana Dean is a youth advocate and the founder of 2 organizations that serve children in crisis. She was selected by the National Foster Youth Institution to go to Washington, D.C. to fight for foster care reform. Her work has been published in USA Today, and she appeared on NBC TV and KTLA Channel 5 in Los Angeles. She is persistent and works tirelessly in an effort to impact the lives of youth. Dean is a student at Mount San Antonio Mount San Antonio College, majoring in film and TV, and her ultimate goal is to become a filmmaker. Her passion is to tell stories that impact lives and change the world. Dean's accolades and accomplishments include a humanitarian award at USC Youth Think Tank, attendee for Disney Dreamers Academy Leadership Camp, and attendee at Leap Leadership at UCLA. She is currently a finalist for an internship at a television academy, and she is also one of our Youth Voice contributors here under the Youth Voice program. And so, Kiana, thank you again for joining us and for always showing up and being consistent. We really appreciate you always being here to be a part of these discussions, and can't wait to listen to you and see what you add to the discussion. And so certainly last but not least, we have April Barquez, who is currently studying political science and legal studies at Rutgers University in New York. They plan to obtain a dual JD PhD and become a civil rights attorney. Barquez is most proud of their extraordinary work, including being involved in multiple collegiate student governments where they have advocated for diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. They have done a wide array of advocacy work regarding foster care reform, have assisted in writing legislation and policies to create change, push for access to resources for current and former foster youth in underserviced areas, and help design and ensure direct cash assistance to foster youth during their COVID-19 pandemic. They also are a proud former foster youth and are dedicated to helping others achieve a high quality of life. As a disabled person, Barquez has advocated for increased access to healthcare and educational access for people with disabilities, and has discussed the increase of risk of disability for foster youth and how to improve the gaps of access in care. And so, April, thank you so much. You are no stranger to the program. April is one of my babies from when I first started at U Voice and at Foster Media Connections. And so, April, thank you so much for just being consistent. You definitely have helped pave the way to help, bring light and awareness to many of the issues that we've tackled here under the U Voice guides. And so, without further ado, I would love to start our panel discussion. And so, first up, I would like all of our panelists, I'm going to pass this over to everyone. I'm going to ask you all to state what city or county that you grew up in, because all of you guys are in different locations. And I did that because I think that it's important that we are highlighting nationally what is happening in across the world in foster care. And so please state what city or county you grew up in foster care, and describe your experiences while you were in the system and your disabilities as well. And I'll pass it over to Rylan first.
Hi, I grew up in Foster City, California, so I was part of San Mateo County. And I have ADHD and PTSD that are both really bad. And they've been pervasive and like part of my life since like forever.
Thank you so much, Rylan, for sharing briefly your experiences. Next, I want to pass it over to Nyasia. And so, Nyasia, could you please state what city or county you were in foster care, describe some of your foster care experiences, and also your disability. Oh, Nyasia, I believe that you're on mute, babe. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Nyasia Kinsey. Hi, everyone. And I have anxiety. I have suffered with depression in the past. It's very possible that I could suffer from it again throughout later on in life. You never know what happens. And I'm from New York, Kings County.
Thank you so much, Nyasia. Next, I'll pass it over to April. The same question, and then Kiana, you can mute yourself and chime right into as well with your experience.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Antelope Valley in Los Angeles County, California, but I'm now in New Jersey. My disabilities are I have ADHD, autism, and PTSD. And I also have a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that comes with a variety of other conditions that are comorbid.
Sorry. I'm Kiana. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, while in foster care. I have a learning disability that I believe it was diagnosed when I was in the 5th grade, I believe. And I also have a voice disability that happened when I was about 16. They put the camera in my throat because they were fixing one of my arteries, and my vocal cords got paralyzed because of that. So my voice is a little hoarse right now, and sometimes I have to speak up or I had to repeat myself like a billion times, but it's okay. But yeah, other than that, that's all. And then my experience in foster care was, Raquel, was that just like
Yes, your experience in foster care, as it relates. Well, we're going to dive into more. We're going to get a little bit more into detail as the questions prevail. But just describing your experience. How long were you in foster care, etc.
yeah, I was in foster care for about 3 years, and then after that I was adopted. I was born into the system, and then I was adopted at 3-4 years old. So I don't really have that much experience being in the system, but I was still in the system technically. So good.
Yes, you definitely still are a part of the community, my love. And so thank you so much for sharing, Kiana. We really, really appreciate you. Next up is Anaya, and then Nisa, you'll be last, but certainly not least. And so could you please describe your time in foster care, your disability, and also state what city or county you grew up in?
Hi, my name is Nia. I grew up in Clay County out of Minnesota. The short list of my disability is I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, autism, PTSD, depression, and POTS. And that kind of had a catastrophic effect on my foster system experience. I was in there for 4 years. At the age of 14.
Wow, yes, thank you. And it's so not wonderful to hear the things that you experience, obviously, and all of the things. That's not the part I'm saying is wonderful, but just knowing you and like how much resilience you have, and just like, being able to speak to you, like, and communicate. You participated in these open discussion forums before. I'm really, 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 really proud, like, just really, really proud, because you like you gonna make me emotional, my love. Okay, so Nisa, want to open it up to you. Please describe your experiences in foster care, and also what city and county that you grew up in, and your disability.
Okay. I grew up in the Napa County system, and okay. Can you repeat the?
Yes, please
I'm
describe.
sorry.
I'm sorry. Please describe your foster care experience, your disability, and then state also what city or county you grew up in while you were in foster care.
Okay, great. So I grew up in Napa County foster care system, and that is where I stayed. And my experience, one value that I gained from being in the foster system was learning how to find value through difficulty. And that really, I think, helped me get through not feeling like I didn't understand why I was experiencing that. And my disability, I have heart issues, so that was if that is why in my intro I described being in the hospital for many months that affected my overall experience. So yeah, it's also amazing hearing everyone's story, so I feel like humbled.
Yes, well, I thank you so much for being here. You're doing a great job. I'm hearing the nervous, butterflies, but don't worry, you're doing a great job, love. So it's okay. And I have no problem with repeating the question over and over and over again. So I got you. We're gonna see it through. So my next question for you guys, and thank you all for sharing your experience briefly. I know we're gonna dive in a little bit more as stated before. So how could resource parents or your adopted parents, your kinship parents, how could they have helped you a little bit more in terms of you having your disability, you being in foster care, and them transitioning you into their home? And then also, I would like for you to follow up with that question with advice that you would like to provide to resource parents or to those parents that, take in foster youth that may have disabilities, and give them some advice from your perspective on how to, better ease that transition into their home, and also encourage them a little bit better. And so I'll pass it over to Naya.
Hi. So I have like a 50-50 split on my support system when I was in foster care. I had my biological mom by my side, but she did not have custody of me. So when it comes to the people who were responsible for taking care of me, they failed. It was a lot more of how can we make this more convenient for us? There were a lot of hospital trips I never got to go to for pain management. One of the things that comes with EDS is chronic migraine and chronic pain. And I'm actually suffering with it today. So excuse me if I have to step off camera. But so it was a lot more than just how can we provide this assistance for her and her disability, and more on the side of how can we prevent her disability from interrupting our daily skills. And then on my mom's side, she was just absolutely amazing. If my staff or my foster parents weren't doing or giving me the support or the need or the stuff that I needed to meet my needs, she would drop work and come and get me, or she would drop off pain management pills, like pick up my prescriptions, things that you'd think that your foster parents are supposed to do for you but don't. And if I had any advice for foster parents specifically, if your kid is diagnosed with anything, PTSD, depression, anxiety, or physical ailments like EDS, just listen to them. If they're expressing pain or discomfort with their body or themselves or how they're feeling, it's important that someone is there to listen and take in and provide the advice and the support that they need in that time. And if I'm giving advice to people in corporate foster care, you're a corporation, but you're here to help people who are desperate for it, who have nowhere else to go. So maybe don't take advantage of that.
Wait, I couldn't even unmute myself. Yes, thank you so much. That was very powerful. And I appreciate the advice that you gave to resource parents, because they need it. And we have resource parents on here that can definitely use, some of the skills and hear it from us, those who've experienced this, that know firsthand. And so thank you so much for sharing. I want to pass it over to Rylan to answer the same question. Rylan, how could resource parents have been more helpful as it relates to you being in foster care and having a disability and transitioning into their home? And then could you also follow up with your question with some words of advice for better practices, better ways that they could, help ease that transition for foster youth with disabilities?
Sure. Okay, and I'm going to give a little context because I completely missed part of your question last time. So I was in foster care at 17, but like CPS was part of my life since I was like 16. And then I was in kinship care, and then I was in and out of the hospital because of like depression and PTSD. Like I spent 1 year, like over 6 months in the hospital, like 6 weeks in the hospital, not 6 months. But both when I lived with my grandmother, and then I had a failed placement afterwards, the people that I lived with were so dismissive of everything that I went through. And not just everything I went through, but they were like expecting me to be okay, and I wasn't okay. And they would be upset. And both my grandmother, and this is part of the reason the placement failed, they literally told me that they were going to try to take me off my antidepressants. The people they placed me with. That's like, and that's so it's like, that's not okay. Like, you have to like work with the doctor. You can't, like, you're not a doctor. If you're taking care of the child, you have to work with the doctor. But this was not what I experienced, right? So both between like my own family and then with my failed placement. And then I also lived in a halfway house. The halfway house was probably one of the most, for me, like the most stable times for me, because like it had structure and routine and nothing, no one's like, so that was a great place for me. But I was also someone who, I have a fantastic psychiatrist. She stuck with me for many years through foster care. I was very lucky. When I talked to different social workers, I learned I was really lucky. She didn't over prescribe or anything like that. Like any of the concerns or fears that people are trying to say around me were not real. I just really respond badly to most medication. It was very difficult. Like I was on like 11 different medications in 1 year because none of them worked. And so my advice would be like, if someone, especially if they want to get better, and they're working with their doctor and they have some sort of autonomy, you don't take that from them, but you encourage it. And, one of the hardest things for me that I always had to do, because I had these additional people in my life that were not supportive, was advocate for myself. And if you're disabled and you have to advocate for yourself on top of being disabled, it's really hard. Because so if you're that person and you can be their biggest advocate and you can help them sign up for things and you can help them get, accommodations by speaking with like their doctor too and supporting them. And because it can be so difficult to fill out sometimes, like there's so many forms, so many. And it's yes. And also if if the child is eligible for like SSI or SSDI, work with the social worker to try to get them to have their own money that they deserve. That's what I would recommend.
Rylan, thank you so much. I am so grateful to have you here today. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And it is okay to get emotional. Every 5 webinars, I cry like three of them, so 3 out of 5 of them, so no worries. But this is a positive discussion, and what I want you to know is that there is a foster youth out there. There is somebody on this call that's going to reciprocate and hear and feel, and we understand what you're saying, and they're going to acknowledge it and use and take this information back, and hopefully apply it to their different practices now. And so I want you to always feel encouraged. Just know that I'm always going to give you that your flowers and that push to keep pushing through, because you're definitely powerful beyond great measures. And just having you here today, sharing your experiences, and all of you guys here today to share your experiences, that's not easy. And so just thank you so much. I'm very, very proud of you. And so I also want to pass that question over to April. And April, did you need me to repeat the question, or you pretty much have it?
No, I have the email pulled up.
Okay, my good.
I think for me, the biggest thing with resource parents and placements was not being believed. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is pretty rare and pretty difficult to diagnose. And so I was telling people like, hey, I'm in pain. Hey, like this is going on, like something isn't right. And I spent pretty much my entire time in care being told that it was just anxiety, that I was just like, everyone's in a little bit of pain all the time, which spoiler alert, that's not true. And so I grew up thinking that everything I was going through was normal. I didn't get diagnosed till about a year ago. And for context, I'm 26 now. So I think for me, the biggest advice I can give to resource parents and people working with foster youth is when a youth is telling you something's not right, when they're telling you they're in pain, believe them. Because foster care is already incredibly lonely for a lot of us. And it's even more so when we feel isolated because we're going through something that people don't really understand. And I think also, like, if a youth is sleeping in, if a youth is not wanting to go to school because they don't feel well, they're not lazy. They're not, it's not because they just want the attention. Like, we are truly in need of help, right? And so those are signs that a youth might have a chronic illness or a disability. And so instead of dismissing it as laziness or just not wanting to go to school, like, ask yourself, like, okay, what's actually going on, and have a conversation with them. Like, make them feel comfortable coming to you and saying, like, hey, this isn't normal, something's wrong. Because a lot of the times I would keep it to myself because I was told all the time that it was anxiety, it wasn't real. And so I stopped coming forward. And because I didn't get help at a younger age, I ended up actually doing permanent damage to my joints because of the condition I have. So the sooner we can get young people care, the more functional we can help them be in life, and the less alone they'll feel.
I love that. I love that. And I appreciate you for sharing, some of the challenges that you had while transitioning into homes, and also providing our resource parents that are here today some much needed advice, because, having active, like, being able to listen is something that is so easy to do, but so hard for some people, especially when it relates to foster youth. And most of the time, we just kind of want to be heard. And I love, well, not really love, but I admire when you brought up, just the medical practices and the different challenges that you experience with people not even believing, that you has a serious condition that needed to be taken serious, And so it's unfortunate that, that we all kind of grow up in different spaces, but that's literally some of the consistent conversation that we hear as it relates to healthcare and foster youth, whether they have disabilities or dealing with mental health issues, etc. And so thank you so much for providing that advice, because it's definitely needed. And so I want to pass it over to Asia, and then Kiana, you will be next.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for the little change. I just wanted to be presentable. For me, there was a point in, how I feel like they could help more is obviously just being, for me, I feel like it starts with identifying what type of foster child you have, because, every foster child is different. Then from there, you can figure out, the best approach to that child. For me, I'm more of a blunt, straightforward person. So I'm more direct. So for me, I would just like more honesty, like, okay, you do have issues that, some people don't have. You have issues that other people do have. This is how we can help you, like it, but they would walk around me as if my world wasn't on fire. All I would see was flames, and they would be going around asking about chips and where we're going on vacation, So, I started feeling weird. But I mean, like, when I tell you the way they ignore you, like, I was going through depression, my first depression story ever. And I didn't eat for a week. No one came in my room. I'm just getting like mad skinny. I'm 18 years old, just turned 18 years old, not eating, like going to her room, like, can I eat this, just this? And is it going to be enough to like keep me alive? Like, and I mean, the sucking teeth and I don't have time for this, but when it was time for me to say, you know what, let me get myself out of this foster home into another one, when I got better, when it was more easier to take care of me, that's when the bribes came. That's when, oh no, we can deal with you, you're going to be great now. That's when I realized, my self-worth, where I wanted to go, and that, it was okay, I was going to make it. So, I just feel like it's about just finding people who care, which is something that you can't fully blame the agency for. You can't fully blame, and you definitely can't blame the foster child for. So, for me, it's a little hard, because for my experience, they knew what was going on, like not eating. You would think, you would have rushed an 18-year-old to the hospital to make sure that, you know, you can get some food in there or something, or at least cook and bring it to the child's room. Nothing like that. So, you know, I think that they definitely just need to pass a few more heart checks before we can let them be foster parents. But at the same time, it's a little hard when they don't have that roof over their head. And we know how much more valuable that is in comparison to affection. So I'm always like, you know what, things could be worse. Let me just keep going. You know, I know how to find the people who are for me now. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you, Naija. Thank you. I appreciate it. And a little wardrobe change don't hurt nobody. And so we just appreciate you for sharing your perspective. Kiana, I definitely want to give you time to chime in on the same question. And then Nisa, follow up with you.
What was the question again?
Yes. And so how could resource parents have been more helpful to you as it relates to you being in foster care, dealing with a disability, and transitioning into their home? And then also, could you follow up with that question with some advice to those resource parents, kinship parents, adoptive parents on better practices or better methods that they can use to better assist and transition foster youth with disabilities into their home?
So as I said, I was adopted when I was about 4, and I've had the same parent since like forever. She wasn't my birth mom, but she's like, I do consider her like my like biological mom, you know, because she was the one that raised me, and she's the one that, you know, is supposed to do like what moms are supposed to do, raise them, teach them, bring them to school, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe she was always like advocating for me and applying to like different resources for me, applying like CYTT. She did all that for me. All the leadership, every single leadership program that I've been a part of, my mom applied for me because she wanted bigger and better for me. She wanted bigger and better for my future and for my life. And she wanted me, you know, to experience like all that, like, you know, everything that's going on in the foster care system. She wanted me to experience all of that, which I really, really appreciated. So I don't have like experience of like not getting, I don't want to sound like, oh, I didn't get it. And I got it and you guys did. I don't want to sound like that. But I was like, I don't have like experience of like not getting those type of resources, but I'm grateful for it. But I believe if for other parents out there, like foster parents or like adoptive parents, I just think that what's really important is like communication, and to like listen to your child, listen to your foster child. You know, they like what the other panelists said, you know, like if they say that they are hurt or something goes wrong with them, that they need to listen to them. They need to do something about it. You know, they need to help them in any way that they can. Be, you know, because like their responsibility. So I believe it's just like help communication, just listening to the child is very, very important. Um, yeah, I think that's all for me. I have.
Yes. Well, Kiana, I just wanted to give you a sidebar because first, this is a webinar where we always most likely will be discussing, you know, challenges and trauma experiences, but we love a good positive outcome, my love. And that is your personal truth as it relates to the question. And your experience was a little bit different. And we love to hear that. We want other foster youth that are out in the world to know that there is a possibility that they will be adopted and they will find a good parent, you know. And so you being here today, and although your experience was slightly different from some of our panelists, it doesn't minimize or make it less, you know, not good. And so I just want you to lift your crown up a little bit, you know, and remember who you are, love, because we appreciate all the perspectives and everybody's experiences supporting here, both good and bad. Just often the bad experiences are ones that we aren't given the platform to share. And so some of my questions kind of tailor towards that. But if your experience isn't of that, then of course you sharing your positive experience with love is what we want you to do. And so thank you so much, Kiana. We appreciate you. And I'm so happy that your adopted mom was really good to you and is still good to you. And so last but not least, for this question, Nisa, did you want to chime in and answer the question? And so how could resource parents have been a little bit more helpful with your transition into their home and as it relates to being in foster care and having a disability? And do you have any advice for foster parents and as it relates to transitioning and easing the transition for foster youth with disabilities into their home?
Yeah, so first I'm going to speak to my experience. I was mostly in an institution setting in group homes and hospitals, so I'm going to speak to that. And I'm going to stay on the theme of self-awareness, self-care, and advocacy. So I feel that in my experience, I found when I didn't trust my situation, when I didn't trust my environment or the people I was with, I started like protecting myself by hiding what was going on, hiding the issues I was struggling with, and making it seem like everything was okay. And that also contributed to me not speaking up for myself when I needed something, or people around me even being aware that there was something going on. So I guess one thing that I would say is to be gentle with yourself and also be gentle with understanding that the people you are with only have so much information. They're not in your head, they're not in your body. They and for the most part are doing the best that they can. So I guess I would encourage everyone to find like a relationship with yourself and what's going on, and acknowledge that you deserve self-care and you deserve to get your needs met, and be confident and bold in speaking up for those needs.
Yes, so powerful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for adding that, especially the words of encouragement to foster parents. Because I mean, being a foster parent isn't hard, isn't an easy job. For most, it's not a hard job because they do it from love. They do it and they lead with intention. But you know, having these type of conversations where we can provide them some needed insight will always, you know, be beneficial, you know, ultimately overall for the system. And so thank you all for sharing. And so my next question is, so we talked a little bit about how resource parents could have been a little bit supportive. And so I want to take a turn into education and your in terms of your education and your employment goals. How were your education and employment goals met? Do you think that school staff could have been a little bit more supportive? And if so, could you provide some advice to school staff, people, and in educational institutions that might possibly be connected to a foster youth with a disability, and that will, you know, essentially help them as, you know, you guys provided the advice to the resource parents? And I'll started with Rylan, and I'm going to pass it to Nisa afterwards. So Nisa, you could come in and chime in after Rylan.
All right. So were my educational plan goals were met? Not really. I mean, my social workers tried, right? Like we would set goals, we'd work on stuff, but it took me like 7 years to graduate from college. Like that shouldn't have happened. And I had a really weird childhood. I was like homeschooled most of my life from my birth parents, and so I'm really proud that I graduated from college. But you know, I don't even have like an actual high school diploma, and I didn't learn a lot. But like yeah, that I had to do it on my own. You know, when I was at Berkeley, Berkeley has Berkeley Hope Scholars, which is a foster youth program. My community college didn't have like anything for foster youth. Like they had a like a club that didn't exist. They're like, oh, we have one, and they didn't. I wish they had. Berkeley Hope Scholars was like my favorite. Being involved with them was great. So like, you know, if you're a foster youth and you're thinking about going to college, I personally think community colleges are great because like the professors they met there were actually quite understanding. Um, and they're very competent. And then I was able to transfer to a great school that had an even better support system. But I don't know, like if I had gone to a school without Berkeley Hope Scholars, like the first week I was at Berkeley, and like I didn't realize this was going to be a thing, and they didn't really prep me, but like seeing everyone with their families dropping everyone off at school was like one of the loneliest like days of my life because like I didn't have family to drop me off at school. But you know, they provided stuff for me and they tried to help. But you know, it can be really lonely. And then one other thing I was thinking about, because they're talking about like loneliness in general, I guess, was there was a period in my life when the only people in my life were paid to be there. And that was a really tough time because there was like, you know, even if like I saw in the chat, like people were talking about like, you know, friendship connections with other foster youth, like that too has fed me, even just like the ones I met through my school. So I kind of had to find it myself, but my social workers tried, but like, you know, they only meet with you, like for me, they met with me like once a month. And my, you know, therapist and psychiatrist, they believed in me, but like, you know, they couldn't house me. Like at the time I need a home. So like, you know, it was tough, but I got through it. And so I'm happy to be here.
Yes, and we're proud of you. You're definitely a champion, my love. We are definitely proud of you. And so Nisa, did you want to chime in with the question? Then next up will be Kiana. And so how did you feel like your education and your employment goals were met? And is there some advice that you would like to provide to school staff or people that are in educational institutions that might be connected to a foster youth with a disability, and that could better help them or better support them?
Yeah, so I feel like during much of my education, I didn't have my education needs met because I think at the time, my providers felt that the priority was my health, like my physical health. So my educational well-being was like down on that list. So when I became an adult and was able to like speak up for myself more, I realized how much I didn't get a very comprehensive education because most of the time I was in the hospital playing board games and I wasn't really expected to do much, and so I lost out on a lot of that background. So when I started community college, I learned how important it was to just build the foundation that I had lost out on and take baby steps by taking that like foundational classes, really advocating for accommodations and being self-aware of what it was that were challenges and what it was that I needed, and believing in myself that even when I felt completely lost and overwhelmed, not giving up, realizing that not like not it's not, even if I like fail a class or if I felt completely lost, just keep trying, just keep moving forward, and ask for help. So yeah, um I would just say believe in yourself and take baby steps.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Kiana went off camera. So Kiana, are you okay to answer the question? You are
Yeah,
perfectly
I'm
fine
okay.
being off the camera. No problem.
Yeah, I have a I'm sorry if I sound a little weird. I'm like just
It's
getting
all
over
right.
a cold. So excuse me. So but what was the question again, Raquel? I'm sorry.
Yes. So as it relates to your education and your employment goals, do you feel like they were met? And then is there some advice that you could provide to those who work in schools or educational institutions that might network or be connected to a foster youth with a disability, and provide them some advice?
So the school that I attended when I was like middle school, like so I went to Carver State High School. So that school district, I believe, was really, really um perfect at like applying and like providing different resources for like foster kids or foster youth, people, students have disabilities. Because I had IEP when I was about in 5th grade. And because of the IEP, I was placed in, like the lower classes, people who just learn at a slower pace, people who have different people also have like ADHD and like people who can't do like really big classrooms, which was me. I couldn't do really big classrooms. So I was placed in those type of classes and it was smaller and they taught us at our pace and it was easier for us to like complete our homework, and because of those classes I was able to graduate high school. And I think that if I was placed in the other type of classes, I would not have, I don't think I would have been able to graduate high school because the other classes were just like so crowded and I personally couldn't do a huge classroom. I needed like that extra help. I needed someone to like be there beside me and help me with certain assignments. And any advice I have for like other schools, I think that they should just like also provide like many, many more resources for kids who need that type of help. And and also listen as well if anyone has like any suggestions. And any of the students, I believe that they should just like, believe in themselves and like they can apply or, do anything that they want to do, like when it comes to like, graduating or anything in school.
Yes, thank you so much. I so appreciate you for sharing. I want to pass it over to Naya. I want to make sure that we get to all of our questions. We have 3 more before we open it up to the audience. And so I want to pass it over to Naya and then April and then Aisha so that I can eliminate the in-between conversation that I'm having as it relates to you guys' responses. And so Naya, you're up next, and then April followed up with Aisha. And the question is, in terms of your education and your employment goals, do you feel like they were met? And then what advice do you have for school officials or those working in educational institutions that can better help them serve foster youth with disabilities?
So yeah, this question also is a 50-50 for me. I've stayed in basically the same school district my whole life, Clay County School District. And it kind of 180'd on me halfway through my education career. In middle school, it's a hard no because it was extremely dehumanizing being there. It's like nobody really cared about education for all. It was mainly just education for easy kids. I feel like I was labeled worse than the problem child. It was more of the it's always something child. With my autism, I had a lot of behavioral issues that needed a safe space to develop into a better environment for me, and I didn't have that. And the only place in my entire school that I could go to where I felt like I was safe was my special ed teacher, who basically saved my life in elementary school and middle school. And then I got to high school, and the first 2 years were ridiculous. My mom almost filed a civil lawsuit against them for not providing me with an IEP and certain things to help with my disability. And there were these resource officers that were always like, I have my eye on you. And more than one time they tried arresting me for things I didn't do because they just wanted me out of the school. And then the other half of my high school, so when I was in high school, there were two principals per 2 levels. So the first level, freshman and sophomore were one principal, and then junior and senior were one other principal. I was lucky because the junior and senior principal was also a friend of my mom's, who was a social worker. So she's worked in the disability community. And even though I was struggling with my physical health with my EDS and my mental health with depression, anxiety, and autism, she was always able to provide that support, get me to my classes. Through senior year of high school, I missed about 90% of my classes. I was home almost all of my senior year, missed all of my opportunities as a senior because of chronic migraines. So I don't think I would have graduated without my last principal. So when it comes to whether or not my needs were met, it's a yes and no. If I had any advice, they're kids and they rely on the support of the people in their environment. So if you feel the need to be in their lives, be the support that they need, especially if they don't get it from home, because I feel like someone earlier said that foster care is already so lonely, and school should be an escape for them to learn.
Yes, thank you so much, Naya. I know I said I wasn't going to chime in, but you guys making me emotional today. And this gonna be my 4th webinar in a row that I'm gonna cry, and I'll be trying to keep it at 3, every 5 webinars. And so I just want to thank you for just having the courage, to speak up and to share your experiences. Your perspective is definitely needed. And you just having this courage, and just wearing it all so beautifully. I'm really, really proud of you guys, all of you guys on the call today. Just being so candid and speaking up. I really love it. And so I want to pass it over to April, and then Naija, you will be next.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything everyone has already said, but I also want to really emphasize transitioning after 18 and 21 as well. Because I think obviously the supports in high school and K through 12 is super important. But I think another aspect of that we tend to forget is when we're aging out, when we're becoming adults and we're going into education and employment, there is also a massive gap there. One, college is expensive. And if you have a disability, having to work and go to school as a former foster youth in general to support ourselves on top of having to manage disabilities is just it's an astronomical it's huge. It's hard. It feels like you're kind of running at a brick wall a lot. And there's times where your disability makes it to where you can't take care of yourself. There are options for disability benefits, but if we're being honest, who's living on $900 a month? Foster parents get paid more than most disability payments for taking care of a young person. So it's forced poverty. So thinking about how the barriers that already exist for former foster youth in general are compounded by having a disability, I think is super important. I have been aged out since I was 18. I did not get any extended foster care services, even though I qualified. And so I have been doing this for 8 years. And there are days where I don't pay that bill or I don't go to work. And the amount of times I have to call out for my disability significantly impacts my ability to hold employment. But because I'm able to work at all, I don't necessarily qualify for enough aid to actually support me. And so thinking about like, how can we improve those barriers? One, how can we make disability payments, SSI or SSDI, more sustainable so that it's actually something that people can live on? Two, what resources can we give to foster youth to close the economic gap that already exists on top of that? But also thinking about like, how that impacts people, because it's difficult. I have moments all the time where I'm like, am I going to be poor for the rest of my life because of my disability? I've had jobs fire me because of my disability. And while yes, I can sue, right, to protect my rights as a disabled person, the reality is disability rights in this country are abysmal. It's expensive to sue someone for disability discrimination. You have to prove intent, which is pretty much close to impossible. And so thinking about like, yes, those protections are on paper, but are they really there? We're more likely as disabled people to not have jobs. We're more likely to be poor. We're more likely to miss work, get paid less. It's actually legal to pay a sub-minimum wage. So thinking about like how our society is set up in general for disabled people and how the intersectionality with foster care and the barriers that come along with aging out that way just compound it. I mean, it's so bad. It's much worse than people realize. And so just keeping that in mind and fighting for those policy changes is super important.
Yes to the policy changes. I really, 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 really appreciate this in your perspective. Naija, did you have anything that you wanted to add as it relates to your employment and educational goals not or being met, and provided any advice to any school officials or educational institutional leaders on how they better could transition foster youth and help them? Wait, you're on mute, love.
I'm so sorry. I would say, in terms of, the resources, the agencies who do provide us with the resources, I feel like the programs, I feel like they shouldn't just stop at the agency, go further, go as far as they can, with like TV ads and like, there's ASAP that's all over the subway train stations in New York City now. Like, it'll let you know what you need to qualify for ASAP and stuff like that. Just start advertising it outside of the agency, because for me, the reason why my educational goals were met was because I was vocal about them, and I was the first in my family who wanted to go to college. And so my caseworker, she just had all of us. So she's seeing the difference in me, and she's like, well, I gotta go the extra mile for this girl. And she did. I'm not gonna lie. Every resource that she gave to me, I filled out, I applied, I got it. From there, I got into school and I started finding my own resources and learning how to network myself. So my educational goals were met, not from any foster parent, but from the agency. Yes, they did a good job with that. So when it comes to advertising it, like on TV or in the subway stations or on posters, where there's just a number and you can come in to an official place, I would say that's the only difference, because the thing is, a lot of people, they're not honest about it. Like I said before, I was only one of my four siblings who went to care, who was just like, this is not my aunt, that's my foster parent. That's not my mom. That's my foster parent. So, let me go up to the agency. They're giving away a free gift card, a $35 voucher, which then leads me to run into my caseworker, and she's like, come here. Have you heard about this? Have you applied to ETV funding yet? So I'm like, no. She's like, sit down and apply. Next thing you know, I'm back at the agency again, because I want to see what else I can get, right? I want to finesse, I want what I deserve. So I'm going around the agency, and next thing you know, she's just like, okay, you should fill out housing, you should applications, you should fill out affordable housing and NYCHA. I said I've already done that. And so because I'm around the agency so much, I've gotten the help from so many people. So I would say, you know, it starts with making us feel comfortable, because a lot of people need more support to start speaking up for themselves, and just showing them it's nothing wrong with going to the agency. Like, you deserve that. In terms of an IEP, extra assistance, you know, I decided to go the straight route, not the straight route, because there's no such thing as normal, right? But I decided to go without it, because for me, I was like, well, I don't need that. You know, I want to be the hardest, toughest person in the world, which turned around to bite me in the back, you know, when I got, as I realized everybody needs somebody, everybody needs to relax sometime. And you know, I think it's definitely important to remind people that depression, anxiety, those are still things that qualify you for IEP. Like, it's not all the time a diagnosis that is more physical than it is mental. You know, it still qualifies you for it. It's something that today I would look into, but as of right now, I'm pretty okay.
Yes, thank you so much, Nyasia. And I love you talking about, you know, the trauma and the different other things that qualify you for IEP, because I think that all of those things are important to include, because there might be a foster youth listening in that didn't even know that they could, you know, activate those resources. And so I appreciate all of you guys for answering that question. I know that it wasn't an easy question to answer, but I really, really, really appreciate it. And so I want to combine this question. And so you guys have already mentioned, you know, we've talked about school and providing you know, advice for parents and for staff and educational people. And you guys also kind of mentioned, you know, your social workers help and the attorneys help, and how they advocated for you. And so could you talk a little bit more about how your attorney or social worker was supportive or could have been more supportive for it to you? And also, could you provide follow-up with words of advice for foster youth like ourselves, that may be in need, maybe dealing with a disability right now in the system, and give them some advice on how they can better advocate for themselves, feel empowered, feel encouraged to speak up, and, you know, why maintaining their resilience. And I'll pass it over to April.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, the main thing is like get FaceTime with that young person. I know caseloads are really difficult, and attorneys and social workers struggle to get that one-on-one time with that young person, but how are you going to advocate for someone that you don't know? So really making sure like you're asking that young person. I think a lot of things I hear a lot from former foster youth is that like, oh, I met with my social worker for 5 minutes, or I literally met my attorney as I'm walking into court. I haven't talked to them for 6 months. And so thinking about, is there a better way to keep consistent communication, even if you just email or text them, in between face-to-face contact, thinking of like, how can you really connect with that young person? And in terms of disability, like advocate for that access to healthcare. Advocate for the young person to lead that conversation. I think a lot of the times when we talk about any type of healthcare and foster care, it's like, you're going to do this and we're going to throw this medication at you, right? And so thinking about like, how can you involve the person in their treatment, in their healthcare, so that they, you know, because like those medications have bad side effects. Sometimes the treatment is almost just as bad as the thing you're treating. And so really making sure that you're including that person in the conversation of what their treatment's going to look like, what works for them specifically, and making sure that they're getting to the doctor. I think a lot of the times I had a hard time getting my foster parent or my social worker or the court to agree to send me to the like specialized care, because Medicaid doesn't always cover it right off the bat. There's approval processes that you have to go through. And so thinking about like, how can you advocate to make sure that young person is getting everything they need? And the only way to do that is to include that young person.
Yes. Wait, I'm like unmuting and remuting myself. Sorry about that. But thank you so much, April, for sharing that. I extremely appreciate the advice that you offered to foster youth. Listening and just being attentive seems like that is something that we are, screaming for the top of our lungs. And so, Rylan, I definitely want to pass it over to you, and then I'll follow up with Nyasha.
Real quick, can you recap the question? I'm so sorry.
Yes. Okay. So we spoke a little bit about basically how could social workers and attorneys be more supportive to foster youth with disabilities? And then also could you provide some advice to foster youth, current and former, who may be dealing with a disability, and give them some advice for how to better advocate for themselves, feel empowered, and just feel encouraged to speak up and be resilient like you all are.
Okay. For the social workers, and this is something my psychiatrist would do with me. So I have ADHD. I will not do stuff that I need to do, right? So sometimes, like, even if you have a short amount of time and they need help doing something, you don't do it for them, but you sit with them while they do it. And you're like, I'm gonna wait with you for 5 minutes while you write that email that you need to write. Because like people with ADHD aren't gonna do it. This is not going to happen. So that was something my psychiatrist like told me that she also uses with other patients, not just myself, that like this was super useful. Because like otherwise I would be like, she'd be like, did you do the thing? And I'd be like, no, I did not do anything. The other thing is for my social workers that I've had to if they could tell me about like other success stories from other kids, that would have been helpful. And then in terms of advice for former foster youth, like I actually wrote something because I did. I wanted to tell everyone, if you have a disability, you need to remember there's nothing like wrong with you. Everyone needs help with stuff in life. And I used to have a huge amount of shame about taking medications, and this came from like my upbringing and like kind of some backwards, views on medications that I was like brought up with. Like I wasn't vaccinated like ever as a child, so I had to have like a catch-up plan once I entered foster care. I got like all my vaccines in like 1 year. But don't be ashamed of building your own support system. I know it's gonna be really tough. Other people should help you advocate for you. But if you do have the energy, please, try to do it for yourself, since you may not always be able to, like, you might be doing well now. And so build those supports while you can, because you might not always be. And also my biggest thing is too, like with healthcare, we've talked about like healthcare having issues, accessing healthcare, at least for myself, like when I live in California, they have really like Medi-Cal is horrible. But Planned Parenthood has always been like, even in Illinois too, like one of my best resources for finding, they're very connected, they're LGBTQ friendly. They'll help you get your, health checked, and they will always hook you up with like local, low cost people or free services. And they will help you advocate for yourself too. And that's, how I found a therapist that like, so yeah, Planned Parenthood's great, and I think men and women can go there. So
Yes, thank you so much, Rylan, for sharing your perspective. I want to pass it over to Nyasha, and then Naya, you will be next.
Okay, I finally got myself off mute. Okay, but no, seriously. For me, I'm a fast learner, so I'm an observer. So when it comes to really understanding things, I just I get quiet and I look at what's going on around me. That's my favorite way of paying attention and understanding what's going on. Excuse me. So I realized that honestly, my biggest thing for everybody is, and it's gonna sound really harsh, but figure out the people who are gonna get whoever you need in trouble for mistreating you. So basically learning their like for example, your social worker has a higher up inside of the agency, but overall that higher up, who is even higher than that, is I found to be the judge in family court. This is not something that a lot of foster kids or adopted kids or kids who are born into the system would know, because they may have been adopted or, shielded away from the caseworkers and whatnot. So they didn't know they had a team supporting them. But when it comes to a lot of foster youth, you can literally get dang near anything accomplished with the letter from that judge. I wish I would have known that being so nice in care would have been so detrimental to my success, because I could have went through a lot less to get where I needed to be. But definitely knowing your chain of context, because the judge is definitely your best friend, whether you're adopted or not. If something really bad happens to you, which I have a sister, she would hate me telling her story, so I ain't gonna say her name. I have a sister, she was adopted. She did something really bad. It was violence. Unadopted, just like that. See, people think when you get adopted, it can never be reversed, but it can. Immediately, she was supposed to locate her new caseworker, file for a NYCHA apartment, and then find out who her judge was and go to family court. She did none of this, and now she has passed her time for her apartment. So, I'm a success story, and you can be a success story without having these things, you know what I'm saying? But I just don't want for anyone who's gone through that trauma to have to still drag themselves along when you really should at this point be getting handed your award, not getting stuff handed to you, getting handed your awards, your flowers while you're still here, so that, you can relax and just reap, the benefits. So that's it.
Yeah, so I have like a really weird answer to this question, because I've had I've lost count, but I'm gonna estimate like 9 workers throughout my experience, just because my mom works for the county that I live in, which can cause a bit of a weird kind of knotted type of environment when it comes to which workers you get. So instead of going through the county, I had to go through corporations, which isn't, awesome. Especially since, they filter out so fast. I'd say I probably only had one social worker / caseworker that was truly awesome. She took me to appointments when my staff wouldn't take me. She was always there for my therapies, checking in that I was getting my medications. She was just all around awesome. But when she had to leave, I don't think I've found a good one since she left. My current caseworker, I don't even remember their name, because I haven't heard from them since they were put as my caseworker, and I think that was like 8 or 9 months ago. So I probably have to go through my emails to make sure that I still have one. But I definitely say that as a caseworker or a social worker, I don't remember who said it, but FaceTime is extremely important. Making sure that they know that you're truly there as one of their supports. I have gotten the feeling since my first caseworker left that they just really don't care. They've got this caseload. I mean, I've met some amazing social workers. Obviously, I said my mom is a social worker. I've met so many of her coworkers that are just up top, the most amazing people you'll ever meet. Sadly, I haven't gotten any of those type of people, because I just they don't know me. I don't know them. Never really talked to them. It was set up even before COVID that we would meet once a year in person to talk, and then the rest of the time would be over email, and even then there were very, very little emails back and forth. And I'd reach out for help and assistance, oh, what can I do if I have this problem? Where can I go if I need help with this? And they just don't get back either within a timely manner or at all. And in a timely manner, I understand, because their caseloads are just so ridiculously big. And I mean, like I can speak in Clay County. I have no idea how bad it is in your guys' counties, but in Clay County, I know that they're just so large. So I can understand, you know, taking some time to get back, but I think three months between conversations is just, that's a little, you definitely start to feel like you've been lost in the cracks. Especially when the things that you're asking for are answers that they really should know anyways. So I say, honestly, just making sure you let them know that you're there. You're there to be a support system. You're there to be their advocate. And if they have to advocate for themselves, or if they have to deep dive and find their own research with everything else that's going on, it's too much for one person.
I totally agree. And I just literally just want to commend you all for just having that courage again to stand, to be a part of this webinar, to have this powerful discussion. We have one more question that we want to follow up, but I have one of my panelists that might have to jump off soon. And so I want to make sure that I'm giving him his flowers by thanking you, Rylan, for all of that you contributed here today. We appreciate you. I hope to see you back here writing. I have an opportunity for you 6 that have participated, a writing opportunity for you guys. So I'm gonna follow up in an email with you all after this, but just thank you so much for this. This conversation was definitely needed, and I appreciate it. So thank you, Rylan. If everybody can give Rylan his flowers in the chat and some hard eyes, we appreciate you, Rylan, for all that you contributed to as well today. And so last but not least, and before Rylan jumps off, I definitely am going to turn this question over to you first. And so we've kind of been in the chat really transitioning, I mean, not really transitioning, but having conversation, good conversation. I'm loving that our panelist was in the chat adding to the conversation as well. And so I want to have a small conversation briefly before we end things, to talk about appropriate language, because one of the things that came up when we even introduced this idea of hosting this this webinar, was in regards to appropriate language, whether differently abled was even an appropriate term to use. And upon my discovery, everybody has like their own different perspectives as it relates to, the appropriate language and preferences that they would prefer to be, used to describe youth with disabilities or people with disabilities. And so I wanted to have that discussion as our last question. And I saw that Kiana had her hand raised. So Kiana, did you want to unmute yourself and let us know?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't think I answered the previous question.
Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry, love. Please feel free to answer. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, so that question was in regards to giving advice to social workers and attorneys, that could, better help support your transition and while you're in foster care as a youth with disabilities, and giving them advice, and then also followed up with providing advice to foster youth as it relates to, how they can better advocate for themselves.
Well, personally for me, I think the social workers should definitely be more encouraging for their children, and believe that, just because that they were born in a certain situation doesn't actually mean that, that that's how that they're gonna grow up, or they're gonna follow in their parents' footsteps. Because my social workers weren't really encouraging to me. They didn't believe in me at all. Sorry, my parents were drug addicts, and my mom was on drugs while she was pregnant with me. And because of that, the social workers, they told my mom, and then they told my foster parents, the parents that raised me for 3 years. They said that, oh, like, she's gonna have like years and years of therapy, and she's gonna go through so much trauma, and she's gonna be on drugs by the time she's a teenager because her mom was on drugs. when she was a teenager and she's not going to accomplish anything in her life and et cetera, et cetera. It's like all like this negative stuff. And my mom didn't believe any of that. And that is why she, was always applying for different stuff for me. And that's why she was always so hard on me, because she wanted me to be better than what my parents were. So for social workers, I just think that they should just like, believe in their children more and like not think that just because they were born in a certain situation, that they were born, in a certain type of environment, like that's how they're gonna grow up. I know that's how that's like what they're gonna go through all their lives. They just need to be like more encouraging to them and just like believe for them and believe for their future.
Yes, and now look at that. Now I'm so happy that you advocated for yourself and raised your hand, because I definitely have missed you and it wasn't intentional. I was just trying to make sure that we get to all of the questions, and so I apologize for that. But I'm happy that you advocated for yourself and raised your hand, because you definitely provided a unique perspective that we need. Because you had a resource parent, your adopted mom was advocating for you. She was, helping you connect the dots and bridge the gap to those resources, and she wasn't taking no prisoners, and that positive outcome is definitely needed and needs to be, talked about. And so thank you so much, Kiana. And so the last question that I want to pass on to you guys is in regards to the language and appropriate language. So Rylan, how do you feel, or what is the correct or the appropriate language when talking or discussing or having conversations with people, especially foster youth with disabilities? Was there an issue with the differently able term? What words would you prefer? What term would you prefer to that is used as it relates to youth with disabilities? This is what this last part of the discussion will be about.
Okay, personally, I don't really have like a huge preference. I would say, just as a good piece of advice for anything, like ask people. You can ask, be like, how do you identify? What words make you feel comfortable? I identify as disabled because I am, and the world wasn't built for me. So like, that's pretty much it. And yeah, but it's just like good language etiquette in general. Just ask people. I know people don't like the words differently able, and it really does, I feel like, come back to that the world wasn't built for us. So we want to acknowledge that in our language. I have to go, but thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Rylan, for all of your contributions, and I'll definitely connect with you later on today.
Okay, thank you guys.
All right, perfect. So I'm passing it over to Naya.
So yeah, I definitely agree with what Rylan has to say. I tell it to everybody when they talk about how they like are afraid to have communication with people who have disabilities. Just ask them. I have never been hesitant to tell people that I do not appreciate how they're talking, and I definitely am not fearful of letting them know that it's okay to ask weird questions, because that's the only way you'll get actual real answers. Personally, and this is why I love this question so much, is because it's different for literally everybody. Personally, I prefer the term people with disabilities. It puts the person ahead of disabilities. It's person centered. Especially when you're talking with fosters, a lot of the time you hear people saying foster with disability. And again, it's like putting foster as that's who they are. I'm a person who happened to have been in foster care, who happens to have disabilities. So when I talk to my social workers, when I'm in cases, when I do webinars, I like to be person in foster care with disability. Just because I feel like I grew up with people constantly putting my disability ahead of me. People always saw my disability and not, Nia. And people always saw foster instead of, who I am as a person. And I feel like that happens a lot. So when talking about people who have disabilities, I feel like it's important to let them know that you see them and not their disability.
Yes, thank you so much, Naya. I appreciate that. I want to pass it over to Nisa, and then I'm going to open up the floor to April to chime in on her perspective regarding appropriate language to use when discussing people, especially foster youth with disabilities.
So I agree with what everyone said. I think it's important to ask what the person is comfortable with, being referred to differently abled, or whatever they feel they identify with. Personally, I don't have an issue with the term differently abled. I think it's one reason it's important to ask what someone is comfortable with identifying with is, one, it helps you acknowledge that their words matter, their perspective matters, and who they are matters. And two, because like I said earlier, we just can't read people's minds. So sometimes that's the only way to really know. It's not good to make assumptions on who people are until you really know them. So yeah, did I answer all of that question?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Okay.
And I agree with you. It's good not to assume. It's good not to make an assumption about what people would like to be preferred to, is what I'm taking from what you said. And I definitely agree with all of that. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. So April is next, and then we're going to have Niaja, and then we're going to, last but not least, will be Kiana.
Yeah, so definitely agree. I think it's important to ask the individual what they prefer. I personally do not like the term differently abled. I feel, and some people put in the chat, I feel like it's used a lot by people who don't have disabilities as a way to be more comfortable for themselves. Like they feel like disability is not a dirty word, but they're uncomfortable with the acknowledgement of disability. And so it's become a euphemism used by able-bodied people a lot as like a different way, a more comfortable way for them to refer to disability and disabled people. So I think that's personally how I see it. There might be people who disagree with me, and there are on this call. So like, it is important to look at individual identities. When I'm referring to people with disabilities as a whole, I tend to alternate between person first language and identity first language, because I think there is this big debate on like, is it good to say people with disabilities or disabled people? And I think it does differ. And so there are a lot of people who feel, myself included, who are perfectly cool with disabled person and actually prefer that. Like disability is a huge part of my identity. I don't personally feel the need to decenter it. But I think there are people who disagree and have different perspectives, and those are completely valid. So I wouldn't usually use differently abled as a term for the whole community. I think there's a lot of, I've just seen a lot of the disability community being very uncomfortable with that term. And so I tend to avoid that when I'm talking about it, the community as a whole. But I do highly recommend asking people, like, what do you want to be referred to as? Because every single person is going to be different.
I want to say thank you, April, too, because without you bringing this, bringing awareness and highlighting, as a potential issue, this question probably would have never had happened. And I think that a lot of you guys as panelists really appreciate seeing this question, because it's important to me that I'm, also being sensitive and I'm using appropriate language I know as foster youth, I don't like being called certain terms. Like I'm not a youth anymore, but so it's a lot of things that come into play. When you're talking about personal preference and, appropriate language. And so I really want to just thank you so much for, highlighting, the term differently abled, because that prompted me to go do some research, and now I know differently, and so thank you so much for that. And so Nyasia, did you want to add anything, or Kiana, did you want to add anything as it relates to appropriate language?
Yes. A lot of times, well, for me, what I simply want to say is I'm not a person who's ever gotten diagnosed with anything but depression and anxiety, and like 2 other things, maybe 3, but it happens. But I would like to say diagnosed with the same things that just leave this mark on the world, like, okay, there's just definite divide between this group and that group of people. So I'm just here to say thank you all for just educating me on what to say, when to say, how to say it, what's the best way to go about it. Because, I'm 25, I'm going on 26 in about 7 months. I want a child. I want to start my own family. And the truth is that people don't think about it until it's too late. But I don't want you guys to shy away from that when it comes to telling people, like, you don't know what type of child you're going to have. You don't know whether they're going to, not type, but you don't know what situation your child is going to be born into. You don't know what you have to, how much extra sleep you're not going to have, how much extra resources your child is going to need. So I'm here to say thank you, in that I'm learning. I'm currently suffering from appetite loss. It's been almost 2 years now. I've been going to different places, but with not having a lot of money, nobody can pinpoint what's wrong. I've developed over a course of time what's needed for me to be able to make it to work on time. Sometimes, I hope this isn't too graphic for you. Excuse me. I'll have to throw up at work. If I have that type of job, then I'm lucky to throw up at work and then go right back inside and not tell the boss, because then it's like, okay, you're fired. Because you never know if it's mold or if it's something in a building where they're like, we don't need this lawsuit, we're gonna get rid of you. Like, someone else said earlier. So I just want to thank you guys and just say that I'm here and I'm listening, and I definitely will take every single thing that you guys said and use it in my life as needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nyasia. Thank you so much for your perspective, and always just doing it so lovely with the zest and the smile. We appreciate you up here at the U Voice program. And so certainly last but not least is Kiana. And so Kiana, did you have anything that you wanted to add to the question as it relates to appropriate language and, when it comes to describing foster youth or just persons with disabilities?
Yeah, so I guess knowing and using the proper terms when it comes to people with disabilities and then people who are in foster care. I think that's just really, really important for everyone to know and for everyone to learn, because most people take it out of a different context, I guess. Personally for me, I didn't really like the topic differently disabled, I guess. It's just, I don't know, just the way that it came off. It was I don't know, it was just kind of not a really proper term, for people who have disabilities, but former foster youth. Yeah, and then I guess I don't really have much experience with the disabilities like the other panelists do. But and then also I want to say thank you as well for sharing the experience, because I also learned a lot as well, because my diagnosis is not as extreme as my other panelists diagnosis are. And I just want to say that I'm thankful for you guys for sharing your experience. I definitely learned a whole lot. And it's just using the certain type of context in any type of way, disability or foster care, it's very, very important. Yeah, and then all disabilities are definitely valid. So it's just, I don't want to say mine isn't as bad or mine, in, but yeah, but I feel like we are just like all in this together, and we definitely learned from each other today. And I very, very much appreciate this panel and this discussion today.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I'm so sorry. Well, I want to tell all of you all, including Rylan, who had to leave, that I so thank all of you guys today for coming and having the courage to speak about such a sensitive topic, but an important topic as well. We all have learned something. I've learned something even before we even had the discussion as it relates to the topic and appropriate language that I very much so will take with me well into, my profession. And so just thank you all for everything that you do, for having the courage to, get out of one system and go back into the system and continue to do work to help, not only uplift the people who serve foster youth, but also help uplift the foster youth. And so I just want to thank you all again. I probably have thanked you a million times. I will thank you a million times after this as well. I have an amazing writing opportunity for all 6 of you guys. So I definitely want to make sure that I send that out to you guys in an email, because I think that some of these experiences need to be shared, and we need to highlight some of these and bring awareness to this through a writing form, a written form or discussion. And so thank you all again. And so at this time, you will see in your chat a link to our post evaluation. And this is just to help me know what I could be doing differently as a program manager, how I could be just leading more impactful conversations that will continue to push the envelope and possibly drive system change, that will also educate and provide knowledge to those who work in spaces that serve foster youth, and additionally provide an encouragement and empower other foster youth that are also in the system now or transitioning out of the system. I want to thank you all for being here today. And so please fill out this post evaluation. You will receive a follow-up email with the recording. If you want to wait until then to fill it out, please feel free to do that too as well. But we needed these post evaluation tips, because it tells me what type of topics you want to hear, what kind of things you want our panelists to be discussing, what type of conversations I could be incorporating social workers or bringing in resource parents, which we will be diving and tapping into all of next year, 2023. And so I'm very, 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 very excited to have you all here today and your continuous support. Our next webinar, which is going to be the last webinar of the year, and it's not a sad thing, because we will be coming right back at you in January with a webinar on careers and higher education. But this is going to be talking about the brighter side of things, where we'll be having our panelists reflect about their positive experiences in a foster care system, especially before their holiday season, where we know, some foster youth will be alone or, struggle with, family or lack of reunification. And so we want to make sure that you guys please feel free to join us for this conversation. The registration link is also in the chat as well. And give me just 1 second. We have an open house. So I'm very proud to announce, and you guys are going to be some of the first people to hear it, that the Youth Voice program is rebranding, and we are changing the program and essentially updating, revamping our mission and everything that has to do with Youth Voice, to essentially highlight all of the great things that we're doing and the direct services that we are now providing to foster youth, in addition to all of the wonderful things we were doing before like these webinars, like our workshops. And so we will be hosting an open house mixer where you can come see the new unveiling of the program, learn more about some of our accomplishments and why we wanted to change the program to rebrand it. And also you will be able to ask any questions as it relates to this open house event and us changing the program. And so I would love to have all of you guys join in on us. I'm going to be dropping the link for that in the chat too as well. And to also stay informed about all of the things that we're doing here at U Voice, please feel free to follow our newsletter, which will also include in your follow-up email. Last but certainly not least, another upcoming event that I look forward to coming this Friday will be, actually tomorrow, we will be opening up opening up submission for our 2023 writing and poetry contest, where we will be highlighting the prison in the pipeline and juvenile justice issues. And so I look so forward to this opportunity. First place for the writing submission is $1,000, and our first place for our poetry contest winner will be $500. And so please feel free to share all of this. You can find out more information about how to register, how to get your submission. I'm going to include all of that in the chat for you all. Again, to support Youth Voice, you guys know Giving Tuesday is coming up, and especially now through now and December 31st, all donations up to $13,500 will be doubled. So to make double impact when you support, you will make double impact when you support Youth Voice this given season. And so this, your support, continued support help me be able to compensate all of the foster youth that come through my program. I literally pay for workshop participations. We pay for interns. We pay for written submissions. Like we really compensate foster youth for their time, their commitment, their contributions, as they should be given their flowers beforehand, because this program is not led by grant deliverables. We are led by just purely trying to provide direct services to foster youth. So if you would like to support us in our initiative to continue to grow this program so that we can continue to provide national support to foster youth and have national conversations like these, please feel free to support us. And so last but not least, I just want to thank everybody who participated, all of our attendees that were in the chat, posting hearts, asking questions, giving feedback, providing their perspective. Like, this type of engagement is needed. It makes my job just so delightful. It makes having and hosting these type of events very much so powerful and fun. For me, I really get a joy. I'm going to say that a lot of this information that you received today was very heavy. And so please feel free to take time to, adapt, mentally and adjust, so that you can continue your day in a positive, positive way. Again, I want to thank all of our lovely panelists for consistently showing their commitment to the U Voice program, for consistently showing up to participate in these conversations, for being so candid and powerful by sharing their experiences, and just resilient. And so thank you all again today. Thank you to Sarah, who's in the background, always handling our technical support and making sure that everything moves so perfectly. We appreciate you too, Sarah. So we got to make sure we give you your flowers as well. Please follow us so that if you want to stay informed about all of the great things we're doing, our webinar list is going to go out so you can have the chance to see all of our discussions, topics, and dates and times and registration links beforehand. And that's something that we want to start doing now to provide you guys a chance to continuously be able to be a part of these conversations and help us grow as an impactful program that is for foster youth and by foster youth. And so thank you all again, and we'll see you next time.